Yo, what's up guys, it's Talon. So today I wanted to show you guys the fact that 4 players I coached this season all ended up hitting Challenger, and kind of wanted to talk about the things that these players learned based on what they told me, as well as some of the main things that I feel like generally that I help people with that really allowed them to climb and reach their new rank. None of these people had previously been Challenger, and they all ended up reaching it this season, some of which I coached last season, some of which I coached this season. These are not the only people I've coached that have hit Challenger. I've had 2 people I coach hit Sovereign. I've had other people hit Challenger. I just so happened to get a lot of these messages right in a row, and so I was like, okay, let me ask these 4 people if they're okay with me mentioning them in my video, having screenshots of it, and kind of showing you guys. But yeah, I've probably had, I would say, over 20 people hit Challenger, roughly over kind of the years I've coached people for maybe like a year or 2. I've had people reach their different peaks as well. I just usually don't end up collecting them, so just decided to collect a few, kind of talk about the coaching and promote it as well. You know, I coach people for $15 an hour. Just DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description. And if you're interested in coaching, we just go over a couple of replays. And it's $15 an hour, so pretty cheap. I might raise the price, but I'm thinking I'm probably going to keep it the same unless I end up getting a lot more coaching. And so yeah, going in, first I'm just going to talk about these players, where they went, like where they started, where they ended up, and then we'll go into talking about some specific tips to help you guys climb as well, even if you're not paying for coaching. So first we have Smoke. So he was a Grandmaster Peak player. I think he was like a 49% win rate. I don't have a specific picture, but I think he was like 49, 50, low win rate. I don't even think it was positive. Ended up after 4 months hitting Challenger. He was even a 57 or 58% win rate, like 55 marks. He was earlier in the season after we'd ended up coaching him, and he improved all the way to that. But then he ended up tilting a lot, going down to like 30 marks from like 55, and then all the way back up to Challenger. So shout out to him for the mental resilience as well. But yeah, definitely helped out a lot there. Then we have Ray. So Ray was already definitely a really solid ADC player. I would say out of all these players, he was the best based on like the time I started coaching him. And so he went straight from GM to Chal in a week after we ended up doing the coaching. He was definitely a really solid player overall. And we gave him a few extra tips to help him climb, and then he ended up reaching that. Now, Knight was probably the worst of these 4 players, and that's not like an insult, just at the time we started coaching him. So he was a Master Peak, and he went to Chal after 5 months. He was, if you can see his stats here, Diamond 2, 49% win rate when we started coaching him. So he'd been a Master Peak, but at that time he was Diamond 2, 49% win rate. And he ended up improving a ton, putting in a lot of effort, and getting all the way up to Challenger with a 53% win rate. So improving the win rate a lot, and just overall getting a lot better, which is really, really cool. And then we have Nightmare. So Nightmare was a GM Peak player. At the time of the coaching, he was 31 marks, and he went to Chal in 4 weeks, roughly. And yeah, this is his profile as well. So going to be talking about these players and just generally what I've learned from coaching. I've coached people on every role to new peaks and everything like that. So let's just get right into that part of the video now. Okay, guys, so getting into specifics. So we're going to focus more on like what you can do after you've had my coaching, or what you can do if you watch one of my other coaching videos and then you realize like that's stuff you could work on as well. So the first thing is specifically focusing on whatever it is, the things, that we point out. So if it's the fact that I write down certain notes from you, really hard focusing on those, or if it's, you find some notes from another coaching that I did on my YouTube channel and you're like, oh, I need to do that too. Really just going into games, only focusing on that, only worrying about those 2 or 3 points, specifically not worrying about all 10 or 20 points that I might have written down. Really just focusing on 2 or 3 things at a time. No matter, again, if you've had the coaching or not, just try and get better at a small amount of things at once. Really only focusing on that. Once you build that as a habit, then you move on to the next thing and continuing to do that. After that, very common mistake I see with itemization is that people will build stuff like stasis and QSS way too early when they're behind in gold. You don't want to build these really defensive items when you're very behind, because then you're just never going to have enough damage. You only really want to build things like QSS and stasis either after your 3rd item, or if you're already really, really ahead and you just want to make sure that you don't die, because you just don't want to give away a shutdown or something like that. 3rd is just having more confidence in limit testing these types of things. So a lot of the people that I'm kind of coaching, they're really trying to play really safe, make very, very consistent plays, which is amazing, and I'm glad that people are trying to be very consistent. But the problem is a lot of times these people don't realize the limits of their champions. So the specific person I'm kind of thinking of is Nightmare, where I was coaching him, and he would put himself in good positions, he would make good plays overall, and then what he would end up doing is having these situations where he can outplay, but he would flash too quickly, even though there were no specific spells that were really dangerous to him, or he would just like overall not really try to make these outplays. And so I want you guys to choose your 2 or 3 main champions that you're playing, and on those champions, I want you to know just by looking at a situation if you can kill or not. Like I want you to have literally tried every situation that you could possibly think, you know, for the next, say, 50, 100 games. Anytime you think maybe there's a chance you can kill, try to kill. And then, you know, if you're wrong, turns out you couldn't kill, that's fine, because now you learn for the future. And then once you've ended up limit testing really well and you understand your champion super well, then you start dialing it back, where now it's like, I'm only going to make these plays when I know it's definitely going to work out, because now I've figured out what my champion can do. And it's also important not just to know your champion's limits, but to know the enemy champion limits. The difference between a lot of these challenger players versus the Grandmaster and Masters is the Master and Grandmasters only think about themselves, but the challenger players are putting themselves in the enemy's shoes. So it's very common where I would tell people they need to keep track of specific spells. For example, you need to know that maybe Viego ultimate and stun onto you is really dangerous, or maybe, you know, Alistar engage onto you. You need to be aware of those spells, because then if Alistar uses his second ability, all of a sudden he's not really a big threat to you because he can't dash onto you. And so these people would see these cooldowns go away, and then they would still be really passive, because it's like, oh, it's a scary Alistar, but it's not a scary Alistar if he doesn't have the spell that makes him scary. And so actually keeping track of those specific spells is something that not many players do, but a lot of challenger and higher players really do. Then after that is a lot of these people would kind of tilt or get really frustrated over a couple of mistakes, whether it was a mistake from their teammate or a mistake from themselves. Generally, after something went wrong, they would get really beat up over it. They would kind of, you know, not give up, but they would just like not really think the game is super winnable. They're just going through the motions instead of really thinking about how can I specifically come back? What's the actual win condition? What can I do to kind of win this game? So just like more kind of just better mental, right? Being okay with the game maybe not going the best in the early game, and really just like being very focused on comebacks, because comebacks are a very common way to win. And on the subject of comebacks is specifically utilization of second dragon. So nearly everyone doesn't understand this well that I coach, and that is that if you are behind about 30 seconds to a minute before the second dragon is about to spawn, what you need to do is start setting up and going to the opposite side of the second dragon. So if the second dragon's on the top side, you want to be setting up around the bottom side of the map, and trying to play for those bottom lane turrets, bottom lane waves, bottom lane camps, everything in the bottom lane. Because if you're able to do that effectively, then you're going to be able to get a big gold comeback. So then on the third dragon, you can go to third dragon and be stronger for that dragon, and then potentially deny the soul from the enemy. Because the second dragon doesn't really matter, because the enemy don't get soul off it, so it's not really super scary, and you're totally fine with giving it up. Then after that is just a general focus on waves. Again, the two things that people don't understand is efficiency and waves. So when it comes to waves, people don't understand a lot about it. First is that you need to push your wave before you make a play. You need to push your wave before you end up roaming. If you're on mid lane, for example, or even top or ADC or whatever, you need to make sure that your wave is pushed before you go and ward, before you go to an objective. The waves allow you to make plays because the waves also give you vision of your opponents. It just allows you to do so much if you have control over the wave. But if you don't have control over the wave, then the enemy can pretty much do whatever they want. And then when it comes to Baron specifically as well around the waves, people don't properly sync their waves. So when you're pushing with a Baron, for example, you want to try to get your top lane and your bot lane, your mid lane, all of those waves on a line so that they're all going to hit the towers at the same time. Because if they're all hitting the towers at the same time, the enemy can't possibly defend against all of them. But if your mid wave is hitting first and then your bot wave hits later, the enemy have a lot of time to go clear, and you don't get as much value out of something like a Baron. And then all of those things, right, are some of the main things. And then the last thing would just be efficiency. So again, it kind of comes down to waves too, or camps if you're jungle. Making sure that you clear your camps before you end up going for ganks or plays, or you clear your waves before you end up going for ganks, plays, you know, rotations, whatever. Because if you're able to get that consistent gold income, then you're just going to be stronger for every fight, and only really giving up this consistency and this, you know, efficiency when there is an objective or something more important to play for. Like you can even see in the replay right now, I didn't just rush over to a random dragon. Instead, I recalled, spent my gold, got my Trinity Force, got super strong. I'm on the map really strong, and even if my team died there or lost the fight, it wouldn't really matter because all they get is a dragon. Whereas now I'm on the map really strong, able to completely dominate, where I might have given away my shutdown if I ended up fighting without my Trinity Force, without half of my Sundered Sky, these types of things. So you can even see it in my own gameplay on the screen right now. And so yeah, that's a lot of the main things. To reiterate the really, really important points from my coaching that you guys need to understand. Understand how to be efficient. Understand how waves work well. Make sure you understand that defensive itemization is mostly useful when you are already ahead. understand that you need to find a couple small mistakes and specifically focus on improving those rather than focusing on a million things at once, because it just is too much and too confusing. Keeping track of spells properly and then not beating yourself up over small mistakes and not getting too tilted when a couple things kind of go wrong early on in the game. And then the last kind of main thing to understand is just, if you're tilted, don't keep playing. If you lost 3 games in a row and you're annoyed, take a break after it. Specifically, Smoke and Shank, who is the jungle who got Challenger that I coached, told me that one of the biggest tips was getting or taking a break after stuff went wrong. So, you know, after he lost 2 or 3 games in a row, he takes a break. He doesn't just keep playing. He said that was really helpful. So just something to keep in mind as well. But yeah, overall, that's really it for this video. Again, main focus on kind of how you can use my coaching or my coaching videos to really kind of improve and everything like that. If you're interested in coaching, once again, DM me on Discord, Talon1169, or through the link in the description. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later.